guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. This is season 4, episode 4 of our Q&A&T series. Now, before we get started, we wanted to let you guys know that at the end of the video, we're going to have interesting announcement, definitely something pretty different from what we normally do. But long story short, we have a Patreon now, and you can access that at patreon.com/BDCKR. And we're going to be talking a little bit more in depth at the end about why we did it and just kind of our thoughts on the whole thing.
Right.
But if you want to get straight to it, you can actually check that out anytime. So our first question comes from CB the Best, and they say, thanks for the previous question, but I have another one. My survival strategy is using my Flashpoint Batman, my best character, with the Crypto Lex Luthor, and Batman with the plus damage boost. Is this an efficient strategy or not?
All right, it's an interesting question because it's actually very specific, right? Because when people usually want to know about what we think about specific teams, they'll ask something a little bit more vague about, well, is this a good team? You know, something like that.
Yeah, an efficient strategy, we can actually kind of measure that more. There's a metric. There's a kind of success criteria that isn't just winning or losing.
Right. And I'd like to, really you need to judge your efficiency based on how long it takes you to finish specifically 3, 6, 9, or 12 fights.
Yeah.
Because we know that after every third fight, you get a last laugh ticket guaranteed. And it's arbitrary on the spins whether you get it or not. And given that you can get unlimited plays using the glitch by resetting your clock and you don't actually have to pay, you can take the cost of the replays out of the equation.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I mean, I'm looking back at some of our fights and I'm thinking along the lines of somebody who's really good, like our Ares with Tantu Totem.
Yeah.
So, and he's a little bit faster than this, but if you can get through 9 fights in 13.5 minutes, or 6 fights in 9 minutes, which is about the same,
yeah,
then yeah, I think that team is efficient. Because it really depends a lot on how you play. Because not everyone plays it the same, even if you gear them the same and you have the same characters. I think that's really it. The most efficient is really the quickest that you can get through 6 or 9 fights. Because I think once you get around 11 or 12, even a good team takes too long to make it worthwhile to aim for that many fights.
Yeah, so that's the number of fights where it still makes sense to keep fighting instead of take the time to use the breakthrough reset glitch, basically, is what we're thinking about.
Or the sort of survivor replay.
Sorry, survivor replay, not breakthrough. my mistake, yeah. Because really, before that, the fight should be easy enough that it's not going to take that much longer when you get a little bit further in. Right. And that's the point where you have to...
I think when you get between 9 to 12 fights, the time it takes you to complete the fights, you can more than make up for in the time it takes you to sort of reset the clock for Survivor.
So there we go.
Oh, so I guess the short answer, I mean, we talked about the reasoning behind it, but we didn't actually say what the reasoning is. So you actually have the best answer for whether it's an efficient team by how long it takes you to finish the fights.
Yeah, so we can't answer. The answer is maybe. We'd have to test it ourselves, but then we'd still play different than you, so it wouldn't necessarily help.
Right.
So there we go. The next question comes from Richard Thomas, and they say, what really sucks for me is I can't get any new gear from Survivor, and I'm in a rut because all I get is Suicide Squad gear, so I can't get in the top %. Any suggestions on how to get better gear?
Okay. So I'm going to try to unpack that question first before we start answering it. So Richard, you're asking us how to get better gear, and the answer is... really gear lockers and grinding power credits, right?
Yeah.
Because you need power credits to buy the gear lockers, and sure, you can get gear from last laugh tickets or multiplayer online seasons, but those aren't efficient for the amount of time that it takes to actually get more, like incrementally. So you want to play some MP so that you rank somewhere.
And I mean, yeah, getting the gear from an MP season can actually be pretty good, just because usually it tends to be pretty high quality gear.
Right, especially if it's a legendary gear season.
Yeah.
But your underlying question is actually really interesting to me, right? Because the part where you say I can't get in the top percentage means that you're trying to rank higher in multiplayer, and that you believe that you can't do it without having the legendary gear.
Yeah.
Which isn't true.
It might make it a little bit harder to not have legendary gear, and it might make things a little bit slower, but I think you can still pretty consistently win at almost any point in the game in the online multiplayer.
Right, because, alright, so the first strategy that you can take if you want to do that is... silvers give you a pretty good payout, and it's less than if you play with golds.
Yeah.
And usually when you're fighting non-max guys, so if you're not aiming 5,000 battle points each time, then you're going to be facing guys that are generally not as well geared out.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the main principles, is that if you don't have enough gear, your goal should be A, to get gear, but B, to try to find the sweet spot where you're fighting people with either less or the same amount of gear as you in online multiplayer.
Right.
And that usually means using lower stat characters and looking for the best characters in a kind of tier that have good passives.
Right. A perfect example of that was our sort of BDC character special that we used for literally a couple of years in MP play, which was Elseworld Flash, Containment Doomsday, and Regime Green Lantern.
Yeah.
They're the two sort of lowest stat golds, but they've got great passives and great play.
Yeah.
And Regime Green Lantern isn't even gold, he's a silver. And we actually, I mean, if I can dig around and find it, I'll put the link in the description. We've got fights where we tried to do as low a gear loadout as possible, like the lowest value gear loadout with that team, and still successfully complete either the 5 battle ladder or the 7 battle ladder.
Yeah, so those are some good grinding kind of teams.
Right.
And I think that's important too, is that at the end of the day, it's really the amount of time that you have to put into it more than anything else.
Right.
And everything else will reduce the amount of time that you need to put into it if you're getting max battle points, if you've got a team that can do the fights really fast.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's just time, and almost anybody at any point in the game, as long as you have, you know, enough characters, enough recharge cards, for your power, right? You can pretty much.
And I'm glad you mentioned time, because if anybody's watching, paying attention to the fight that's going on, you might notice something about how we're trying to get through as fast, and we're not looking at everybody's gear at the beginning. So one of the questions that I'd seen on a board, not question, but more comment, was that the people who grind to rank in the top 10, not 10%, but the top 10
Yeah.
for multiplayer, have to put in a bare minimum amount of time. And their estimate was that they were being very generous in saying that it would only take them 15 minutes to finish an ultimate. And that didn't sound quite right to me. I think it may be a little bit faster than that, but not by much. But 15 minutes seems a little bit long. So instead of doing the way we normally do, trying to be as informative in the fights, this time we're actually going to try to play it like we're grinding it.
Yeah, so we're going to go as quick as possible.
So yeah, that goes towards efficiency, right? So so in the gold team of Elseworld Flash and Containment Doomsday and Regime Green Lantern, I think in most of those fights, the only person we've got any kind of legendary gear on is Regime Green Lantern. Because he's our tank. We were using Fourth World gears, and you can see in most of the fights he's actually not even necessary. He doesn't come into it because we've got 2 main damage dealers, and they're rocking signature gears.
Look, here's Regime Green Lantern. Yeah, he's more of an emergency kind of clause.
And he's a tank. He's basically our meat shield.
Oh, and you could see there we had to use energy recharge cards because we don't have any way of watching the ad because we broke it for ourselves.
That's it.
Anyways, that's just if you've been following the BDC character canon, I guess, and you've been following along with our struggle.
Yeah. So, yeah, just so you know, we're still working on that. We don't have an answer. We'll let you know when we've got an answer about how to fix that. Because, you know, now we're personally invested, as opposed to before when we cared, but we actually had no way to try different things.
Yeah, so I think we've taken a pretty meandering route to answering this question.
Yes.
But
so silvers or low stat golds, aim for something lower battle points per fight that you can finish quickly, and that you end up facing opponents that aren't as well geared out, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, so there we go. And at the end of the day, you need a certain amount of time too.
Yes.
Yeah. So our next and final question comes from Mohammed, Rehan, Nagauri. Not sure if I pronounced that right, but just power my way through. And their question is, what are your thoughts on the nerf of Ra's al Ghul's Scimitar? Do you feel that the nerf was needed?
Okay, so I'm guessing that you're talking about the nerf where some characters that used to have a lot of multiple hits on combo ender, each of which would process...
Like a certain Green Lantern.
Oh, yes. A certain lady. And she would do a massive amount of extra damage on the combo ender and power drain.
Because I think she was really the reason why it got nerfed. I don't think it needed to have gotten nerfed before that.
Yeah, and for some characters, I think it's not nerfed that much. I think for the regular Deathstrokes, right? Not this guy.
Yeah.
But the regular Deathstrokes still do like a couple hits, and I think Nightwing still does a couple hits on the combo ender.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, there's different design philosophies, but I think nerfs are never actually necessary. I think better than nerfs is to retroactively buff or to make readily available new stuff that that kind of matches a nerf.
Right.
And I think there's very few exceptions to that. I do think that the amount of power that you could drain with a single swipe combo ender was maybe a little bit crazy.
Tap.
Tap, sorry. Man. Okay, yeah, I think it was a little while because it was so much, but at the same time it felt really good. And you know, you can structure a strategy around basic damage. You can do stuff right and move around it, and that's always been kind of the way that the meta works.
Yeah.
It's always been finding a way around kind of whatever the prevalent strategy is.
Because I think you can find a way around everything. I think I totally agree with you. I think nerfs are never good, and they're never needed, because even stuff that's really, really bad. Remember when there was we had those cheaters, and this is, I'm not putting it the same way, but I'm saying just as an extreme case of something that's difficult to deal with.
Like the champion areas, the breakthrough areas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they'd have a bunch with the Astro Harness. So there's still strategy for winning. Now it makes it harder, but there's strategies for not only winning but strategies for avoiding. Right? When we play a non-maxed out team, you're not going to be facing that guy.
Yeah.
So even then, and again, I'm not advocating that they should have left them in, but that even something as tough as that you can work around, than something where it's just a particular piece of gear. I mean, the best example of this where they shouldn't have done it, and somebody might have had the impression that somehow he was overpowered, was Red Lantern Hal Jordan.
Yeah.
He was so much fun to play, and they fixed part of him by reducing his special 2 damage back to what it should have been. But they actually nerfed him by taking away, or making it so that you had to wait for his powered recharge, so you couldn't just drop a couple specials immediately after the other. And it was not that difficult, because when you're playing against him,
you basically just use a tank and block.
Yeah,
and he's using his own health, or you just whack him really hard, and then he has no specials left.
Right, so it was in the hands of the player that it was good, and I think that's an especially egregious kind of nerf, because it makes the fighting experience more frustrating for not a lot of benefit, right? You're not taking away any frustration from the player.
For sure. And I feel like that's true. Anytime it's an offensive nerf, as in it's a nerf that applies mostly to offensive players, and not when you've got your team in on the defensive, it's unnecessary. Because the worst thing that you're doing is letting people get through fights faster. That's the worst case scenario, or making it very difficult for them to lose. And I mean, you can already kind of set up stuff like that on your own. You don't actually have to have it be super unbalanced for you to be pretty confident that you're going to win.
Right.
And you don't need something way out there for you to set up a team to win as fast as possible. Those are both good things that you should aspire for.
Right.
If it's screwing up defense, if it's wrecking defense and there's very little offensive potential, that's when I feel like nerfs are okay.
Yeah.
It's like the way that early online multiplayer was, with healing forever.
Yeah.
That was no fun for anybody.
Yes.
Because the person playing didn't feel like they were cheating the system, and the person who was on defense was making not quite insurmountable, but just annoying fights. So that's a nerf. That's one time where I think a nerf is justified.
I'm gonna maybe respectfully disagree. I think part of what happened with that, when we started playing multiplayer and the healing gears stacked, it's that sort of pushed me in the direction that I like now to play here, where I go totally offensive. So the faster I get through, they're not going to have a chance to heal, because they won't have a chance to do a special, or if they do, 1 or 2, and then I'm just, kicking while they're down.
That's true, and I think that's a way to play it. I think the reason why that the health was not good is because that made it one of the only ways to play it. And I feel like when you've got a game with as much opportunity to pick how you want to play as this, it would have been fine for us. We would have eventually adapted, but I feel like it would be crappy for a lot of other people who would have felt like they were boxed in and had to play a certain way.
That's actually a fair point. I will give you that. I think you're right, actually.
Yeah. So I think that's what it comes down to for me. I think the only time that a nerf is acceptable is if it ruins online play in favor of the defensive team.
Right.
And pretty much anything else, even if it's pretty much wrecked in favor of the offensive team. Make some better guys next time around. Let people feel really powerful for a while, and then make people get really excited about how good the new guys are, that they can actually beat the crap out of the old guys.
Right, or the new gear, Tantu Totem.
Yeah, that's true.
Looking at you.
So there's a lot of ways to kind of even the playing field a lot. And now that they've retroactively changed some passes of some old guys and buffed them up, right?
Right.
That's cool too. It's all good.
Yeah.
I think all of that's better than nerfing, unless it's making healing gears not stack. That one was okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So there we go. That's all the questions. So we've got something lined up at the end where we're going to look a little bit about the grinding speed but now's our chance to talk about the Patreon that we have now started. Patreon.com/BDCKR if you want to check it out. I think the first thing, and maybe the most important thing, is why we've done it. Because, like, people have asked before, you know, do a Patreon. I'll throw a buck or two your way. And our answer has always kind of been like, hey, we don't need your money.
Well, it's not even so much we don't need your money, because that sounds a little bit rude, but I'm well, you know what I mean? It just...
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I thought I was thinking always along the lines that it felt a little bit like double dipping, right?
That's true.
Like, we've got your eyeballs, you're watching our videos, we're getting ad revenue from YouTube.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, also, Patreon feels like a platform for people who are getting money for content that they couldn't make otherwise.
Right, so it's the difference between being able to make it or not make it.
Yeah, it's like people turning passion projects into careers.
Right.
And
we've never been about a career.
Yeah, so for a couple reasons, Patreon felt unnecessary for where we're at.
Right.
But more and more recently, it seems like Patreon and merch and kind of additional income streams have become more and more like an integral part of being a YouTuber.
Can I say the what people are probably hearing in the news in the last week doesn't apply to us, but it's sort of relevant. Maybe I should... With
1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours in the past year requirement to start getting ads on your videos.
And it seems like, again, it doesn't affect us. We're above that level, but it feels like what it's doing in practical terms is hurting really a lot of the smaller YouTubers that are trying to grow or develop.
Yeah, the really little guys.
So that's not what's affected us. What's actually affected us in the last couple months is something else that YouTube's been doing. And they say that it's to make it more transparent as far as monetization, but there's a status for your video sometimes where they say that it's not suitable for most advertisers.
And basically that means that although technically you can get ads, you really, for the most part, aren't getting any ads.
Right.
And you lose out on money. And what sucks is, our content, as I think you guys will be able to confirm if you've watched any amount of it, is, like, downright family friendly, really. There's very few swears. Almost no swears. There's no discussion of, like, sensitive topics, really. We're talking about video games, and we're not even talking about video games in, like, a offensive or divisive way.
Right. And the next crazy part is that once we've actually submitted a manual appeal for every one of our new videos that comes out, they'll change the status back to monetize when they realize, oh, okay, it actually is suitable. You just got caught in our automated filters unintentionally. We've already passed the point, which is in the first 24 hours, where we get most of the views on each video.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why we're starting a Patreon, is because basically when we make a new video, almost all the money that we were going to make from it, especially with our recaps, our Q&As, right? Our kind of regular content. The most of the ad revenue that we could have made from it is taken away by this limited monetization feature. So, I mean, this has never been about the money. Definitely not first and foremost, right?
Not only
about the money, although the money is something kind of extra on the side. We're definitely happy to have it there, and it's a really cool kind of facet of making content that enough of you like that we're actually getting paid a little bit. The problem is now with most of our content, really, we've been making it because we enjoy doing it, and now we're making it pretty much only because we enjoy doing it, because the even $1 that we would have made from the revenue, not even a huge amount, is dropped down to cents. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons.
And that's been a few months. Like, this was not, we did not take this kind of lightly. This was something that we've been thinking about for the last few months as we've noticed it happening.
And another reason, like we mentioned, it's become more and more a part of the YouTuber experience, and part of the other reason why we have this channel is because ever since we started it, it's been really interesting to kind of firsthand have experience with what being a YouTuber is like.
Because it was never aiming for any kind of specific idea of success, I think. When we started, it was not to say, oh, we wanted to be this big or whatever. It was just, hey, this is a thing that we can do. Let's just try it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, whether we were making, like, cents or dollars a day,
oh my God,
at various times, never more than, like, a handful of bucks.
All right, so the first day that we actually hit, like, that we actually earned any money, I think it was, like, 10 cents.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God,
we've made it.
We've made it. And I did calculation, I'm thinking, how many years is it going to take to eventually
for us to pay out? Yeah, and then in a couple months it was there.
Yeah.
But So the looking at analytics, looking at the community, right? Like actually
right.
replying to comments and stuff and fostering, I hope, a little bit of a community.
Right.
On the channel. All of that has been really interesting, and it's been a really illuminating look at what it's like to make YouTube videos. And now I feel like for almost every creator now, Patreon is another part of what it's like to make YouTube videos. So this is another opportunity to see what happens with that.
Right. So listen, if you want to contribute, that's great. We totally appreciate. But if you decide not to contribute, we still appreciate it because you're watching our videos.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, like, at the end of the day, this is not going to affect whether we make content or not. And I think that's really important. We mentioned that prominently on our page, and it's important to mention it again now. We're still going to make videos whether or not you donate to us.
Right.
And if we eventually stop making videos, it's not going to be because you personally did not give us a buck on Patreon.
Right.
You don't have to feel any sense of guilt, like we need this money to for food or for anything.
Or obligation.
Yeah. You don't owe us anything. The fact that you're watching is actually more than enough. This is an opportunity if you want to give us money, first and foremost, more than anything else. Yeah. So this is another thing. Honestly, one of the reasons why we haven't started a Patreon is because I think at a lot of points, at least me personally, I was like, nobody's going to give us any money.
Right.
And I still think there's a decent chance that nobody's going to give us any money. But at this point, I think we're making little enough money from YouTube that it's worth asking, right? Before it felt like if we asked and everybody said no, what I would take from that is, why did I ask in the first place? I'm already getting money from YouTube. I'm getting greedy. And now it's
that's a double dipping. But
yeah.
And you know what? Nobody wants to be rejected.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we're going into this hopeful, as we're always hopeful when we do anything. Right. We're trying not to go into this half-baked. We hope that it's, we've done a decent job of it. But we're also going into it with the very real expectation that, giving somebody who's making, videos for a mobile game money, and especially somebody who's made most of their platform on telling people how to basically avoid getting in-app purchases and get straight to the easy money without actually having to spend anything except your own time. It's a big ask, but
and I totally see the irony in it.
Yeah. So it's definitely a big ask for you guys, and it's definitely something that we're reticent to do, and we're doing now with kind of a healthy understanding that there's a decent chance that this will result in I guess you'd call it failure.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, we're trying something out, and we think it's interesting. And I mean, really, if a single person decided that it was worth sending us some cash, that would be a cool feeling. It would be cool to know that there was somebody out there who liked us enough to give us that money. And that's what it's all for, right?
That's like Sally Field with her Oscar.
Yeah.
You love me. You really love me.
Yeah.
And it finished.
Ooh, there we go.
Okay. Was that what you wanted to say?
I think that's pretty much it. I don't know. We might bloviate on this. We might talk about it more, depending on in the coming weeks what happens with it. But
all right. So looking at the numbers, we just made 112,000 battle points. It took us 23 minutes, give or take. So what you're looking at with the math, if you want to rank in the top 10, I think 10 million is a healthy number to get there.
Yeah.
If you want 10 million in a week, that's going to take we're getting at about just under 5,000 battle points per minute of play.
Yeah.
It'll take you about 34 hours plus of play. And if you're only aiming for 5 million in a slow week, then that'll take half the time, which is, I think, eminently doable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to commit, we are talking about the time that you would be spending at a full-time job.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as you hit 40 hours. So that's a lot of time. But I mean, if this is all that you do in your free time, if you are hanging out and you just love injustice, like the people in the leaderboard obviously do, then it's reasonable.
Well, I wouldn't say reasonable, but
it's doable. it's achievable.
It's doable.
So there we go. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Komoda.